Hi everyone. I'm really excited about today's story because it allows me to stay committed to what I told you in the beginning of the year, where we wouldn't be reading stories by sort of that old dead white guy, the canon sort of like I was gonna try to branch out and provide different perspectives. And it's uncommon lit, so that's pretty perfect for what we do in class because common lit Wednesdays, right? So this screen probably looks familiar to you, where you can see the list of stories that I've assigned. Today's story is titled Cell 1. If you click into Cell 1, which will allow me to do right here, you will see, and I have a different sort of screen than you because I'm on the teacher end, but no students have submitted it, and here's the students who have signed in, and so on and so forth. Click here, open up the story. Cell 1 is a story written by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and it deals with themes like family relationships, politics, equality, but it's not necessarily politically driven. We just are allowed to kind of see, as a result of what happened within this family and the events, uh, the politics of where the story takes place, which is Nigeria. Just like always, you'll see over here the assessment that goes along with the story and discussion questions that you are to answer as well. So um, I am going to spend some time here reading with you. I don't know that I'll read the whole story, but I may. We'll kind of see how it works out. So cell one begins like this. The first time our house was robbed, it was our neighbor Osita who climbed in through the dining room window and stole our TV and VCR, and the Purple Rain and Thriller videotapes that my father had brought back from America. The second time our house was robbed, it was my brother Namabia who faked a break-in and stole my mother's jewelry. It happened on a Sunday. My parents had traveled to their hometown to visit their grandparents, so Namabia and I went to church alone. He drove my mother's green Peugeot 504. We sat together in church as we usually did, but we did not have time to nudge each other and stifle giggles about somebody's ugly hat or threadbare kaftan, because Namabia left without a word after 10 minutes. He came back just before the priest said, "The mass is ended, go in peace." I was a little piqued. I imagined that he had gone off to smoke or to see some girl, since he had the car to himself for once. But he could not at least but he could have at least told me. We drove home in silence, and when he parked in our long driveway, I stayed back to pick up some Exora flowers while Namabia unlocked the front door. I went inside to find him standing in the middle of the parlor. "We've been robbed," he said. It took me time to take in the room. Even then, I felt that there was a theatrical quality to the way the drawers had been flung open, or perhaps it was something that I knew my brother too well. Simply that I knew my brother too well. Sorry about that. Later, when my parents had come home, and neighbors began to troop in and say "Ndo, sorry," and to snap their fingers and heave their shoulders up and down, I sat alone in my room upstairs that and realized what the queasiness in my gut was. Namabia had done it. I knew it. My father knew it too. He pointed out that the window doors had been slipped out from the inside rather than from the outside. Namabia was usually smarter than that. Perhaps he had been in a hurry to get back to church before Mass ended, and that the robber knew exactly where my mother's jewelry was, in the back left corner of her metal trunk. Namabia stared at my father with wounded eyes and said that he may have done horrible things in the past, things that have caused my parents pain, but he had done nothing in this case. He walked out to the back door and did not come home that night, or the next night, or the night after. 2 weeks later he came home gaunt, smelling of beer, crying, saying he was sorry, that he had pawned the jewelry to the Hassau traders at Engwe, and that the money was all gone. "How much did they give you for my gold?" our mother asked him, And when he told her, she placed both hands on her head and cried, "Oh no!" And then in Nigerian, "My God has killed me." I wanted to slap I wanted to slap her. My father asked Namibia to write a report, how he had pawned the jewelry, what he had spent the money on, and with whom he had spent it. I didn't think that Namibia would tell the truth, and I don't think that my father thought he would. But he liked reports, my professor father. He liked to have things written down and nicely documented. Besides, Namibia was 17, and with a carefully tended beard, he was already between secondary school and university, and he was too old for caning. What else could my father have done? After Namibia had written the report, my father filed it in the steel cabinet in with his study where he kept our school papers. That he could hurt his mother like that was the last thing my father said on the subject. But Namibia hadn't set out to hurt her. He had done it because my mother's jewelry was the only thing of value in the house, a lifetime's accumulations of solid gold pieces. He had done it, too, because other sons of professors were doing it. This was the season of thefts on our serene campus. Boys who had grown up watching Sesame Street, reading Enid Blyton, eating cornflakes for breakfast, and attending university staff primary school in polished brown sandals were now cutting through the mosquito netting of their neighbors' windows, sliding their glass loose, and climbing into steel TVs and VCRs. We knew the thieves. Still, when the professors saw one another at the staff club or at church or at a faculty meeting, they were careful to moan about the riffraff from town coming into their sacred campus to steal. The thieving boys were the popular ones. They drove their parents' cars in the evenings, their seats pushed back and their arms stretched out to reach the steering wheel. Osita, our neighbor, who had stolen our TV only weeks before Namibia's theft, was lithe. And if you scroll to the bottom, you'll see that lithe, going all the way to the end of the story, means thin and graceful. There are more words at the bottom there, words that you maybe aren't sure about, but can reflect back to. And I think if you also click there, it gives you the definition as well. So he was lithe and handsome and in a brooding sort of way, and walked with the grace of a cat. His shirts were always crisply ironed, and I used to watch him across the hedge, then close my eyes and imagine that he was walking toward me, coming to claim me as his. He never noticed me. When he stole from us, my parents did not go over to Professor Ubebe's house and ask for our things back, but they knew it was Osita. Osita was 2 years older than Namibia. Most of the thieving boys were a little older than Namibia, and maybe that is why Namibia had not stolen from another person's house. Perhaps they did not feel old enough, qualified enough, for anything more serious than my mother's jewelry. Namibia looked just like my mother. He had her fair complexion and large eyes, and a generous mouth that curved perfectly. When my mother took us to the market, traders would call out, "Hey, madam, why did you waste your fair skin on a boy and leave the girl so dark? What is a boy doing with all this beauty?" And my mother would chuckle as though she took a mischievous and joyful responsibility for Namibia's looks. When, at age 11, Namibia broke the window of his classroom with a stone, my mother gave him the money to replace it and didn't tell my father. When a few years later, he took the key to my father's car and pressed it into a bar of soap that my mother found before Namibia could take it to a locksmith, she made vague sounds about how he was just experimenting, and it didn't mean anything. When he stole the exam questions from the study and sold them to my father's students, she yelled at him, but then told my father that Namibia was 16 after all, and really should be given more pocket money. So we're starting to see a trend in him, that maybe we were leading to this robbery. He had sort of gotten away with a lot of things, partially because because of his good looks, and it sounds like maybe he was the golden child of the family, so to speak. I don't really know whether Namibia felt remorse for stealing her jewelry. I could not always tell from my brother's gracious smiling face what he really felt. He and I did not talk about it, and neither did my parents. Even though my mother's sisters sent her their gold earrings, even though she bought a new gold chain from Mrs. Mosey, a glamorous woman who imported gold from Italy, and began to drive to Miss Mosey's house once a month to pay in installments. We never talked about what happened to her jewelry. It was as if by pretending that Namibia had not done the things he had done, we could give him the opportunity to start afresh. The robbery might never have been mentioned again if Namibia had not been arrested 2 years later in his second year of university. So here I've read down to question 3 and stopped. But remember that there is also question 2, question 1. Odds are you probably had to answer the questions before you could continue. And so I'm going to give you a chance to kind of catch up here. By then, it was the season of cults on the Nasuka campus, where signs all over the university read in bold letters, "Say no to cults." The Black Axe, the Buccaneers, and the Pirates were the best known. But they had been benign fraternities. And pause here, benign, meaning having no significant effect or being harmless. So they were harmless fraternities. But they had evolved, and now 18-year-olds who had mastered the swagger of American rap videos were undergoing secret initiations that sometimes left one or two of them dead on Odom Hill. Guns and tortured loyalties became common. A boy would leer at a girl who turned out to be the girlfriend of the Capone of the Black Axe, and that boy, as he walked to a kiosk later to buy a cigarette, would be stabbed in the thigh. So Capone is an allusion, is what we would call that, to Al Capone, who was a famous gangster in the, I suppose, early 20s, and was known as sort of the leader. So you can use that to equal the leader of the Black Axe. He would turn out to be a buccaneer, and so would one of his fellow buccaneers would go to a beer parlor and shoot the nearest Black Axe in the leg, and the next day another buccaneer would be shot dead in the refectory, his body falling onto aluminum plates of gari, and that evening a Black Axe, a professor's son, would be hacked to death in his room, his CD player splattered with blood. Let's backtrack a little to see what refectory is. The cafeteria. It was inane. Inane meaning stupid and pointless. It was so abnormal that it quickly became normal. Girls stayed in their rooms after classes, and lecturers quivered, and when a fly buzzed too loudly, people jumped. So the police were called in. They sped across campus in their rickety blue Peugeot 505 and glowered at students, their rusty guns poking out the car windows. And Mabia came home after his lectures laughing. He thought that the police would have to do better than that. Everyone knew the Cult Boys had newer guns. So we've reached question 4, which says, the narrator claims that the boys belonging to cults, A, are committing increasingly serious and violent crimes, B, don't realize that what they are getting themselves into, C, are largely harmless and commit small crimes, or D, are forced to join the cults by other members. Continuing on now. My parents watched Mabia with silent concern, and I knew that they, too, were wondering if he was in a cult. Cult boys were popular, and Namabia was very popular. Boys yelled out his nickname, The Funk, and shook his hand whenever he passed by, and girls, especially the popular ones, hugged him for too long when they said hello. He went to all the parties, the tame ones on campus and the wilder ones in town, and he was the kind of ladies' man who was also a guy's guy. The kind who smoked a pack of Rothmans a day and was reputed to be able to finish a case of Star beer in a single sitting. But it seemed more his style to befriend all the cult boys and yet not be one himself. And I was not entirely sure either that my brother had whatever it took, guts or diffidence, to join a cult. Diffidence meaning the quality or state of being assertive. My video length has come to a close here, so check in with video number 2 on today's PowerPoint to continue with the reading of Cell 1.